In the early days of the COVID-19 pandemic, travel demand plummeted and nearly every global airline grounded most, if not all, of their aircraft. Some went a step further and retired entire aircraft types from their fleets. Few were as cutthroat as American Airlines, which retired 5 different types in a single week, including its Embraer E190s, Boeing 757s and 767s, and perhaps most controversially, all of its 25 Airbus A330s. Americans' reasoning for the A330s was simple: reducing the diversity of its fleet would reduce costs. The aircraft had joined the fleet via its merger with US Airways in 2013, but American was focused on an all-Boeing long-haul fleet going forward, with nearly 70 examples of 777s in operation and large orders for the 787 Dreamliner, both -8 and -9. But how much did the Oneworld member make from selling its A330s, and where did they end up? We take a look at the airline's decision to cut this particular subfleet for today's video. When American initially retired 5 aircraft types, it reported that it resulted in a, quote, $1.5 billion non-cash write-down of mainline and regional aircraft. Now, to be clear, the A330s were just a portion of that huge amount. However, being more than a quarter of the total aircraft retired and being larger and younger, it is likely that at least $500 million of the write-down was for the A330s. But it didn't end there. In 2022, the airline's first quarter results included a $157 million impairment charge associated with the A330s. For those of us who are not accountants, Investopedia defines it as a term used to describe a reduction or total loss of the recoverable value of an asset. Last year, it became clear that American was gradually disposing of the aircraft, and this was confirmed in its filing to the SEC in February this year, in which it recognized a $42 million gain from that sale. Simple Flying reached out to American for comment, and a spokesperson told us, "We retired our Airbus A330 fleet in 2020 as a result of the decline in demand for air travel due to the COVID-19 pandemic. In 2022, we recorded a non-cash impairment charge to write down the carrying value of our retired Airbus A330 fleet to their then estimated fair value due to the market conditions for certain used aircraft. And in 2024, we entered into a sales agreement for our remaining Airbus A330 aircraft, resulting in a $42 million gain." Although over $40 million was gained, it is worth noting that it came after writing down hundreds of millions in their value. Did American make the right call on retiring its A330 fleet? Well, we need to remember that when the carrier decided to retire these Airbus widebodies in April 2020, air traffic cratered and there was zero clarity on when normal air travel would return. With a genuine threat that the pandemic could rapidly put even the largest airlines out of business, American made some drastic cuts in the name of self-preservation. Retiring old 757s and 767s was an easy decision. Retiring the only wide-body Airbus aircraft in an all-Boeing wide-body fleet going forward also seemingly made sense. Well, until it did not. Fast forward 2 years, air travel was surging again and demand was highest for long-haul international flights. For Delta and United, with international fleets of 200-plus aircraft and new wide-bodies arriving monthly, it was a boom time. But American wasn't able to capitalize on the bounce back in the same way, and we can see the impact in the comparative profitability of the Big Three to this day. Having retired 76 aircraft from its international fleet in 2020, American had just 113 wide-bodies available for the summer of 2022, 67 777s and 46 787s. Even worse, it had bet the house on its 787 orders filling the gaps, but well-publicized production delays at Boeing forced delivery delays. It was still years from restoring its international fleet to normal. Not surprisingly, there was much speculation at the time that it might bring back the A330s that were still parked in the desert, but American confirmed that it would not do so for the very simple reason that it no longer had the pilots to fly the aircraft. Since there was seemingly no Airbus wide-body future, Many of the A330 pilots reportedly hopped over to Delta, which has 75 A330s in its fleet, with even more A330-900s on the way. 9 of the 25 A330s were -300s, all over 20 years in age. These were delivered to US Airways back at the start of the century. Given that there is a glut of second-hand A330-300s in the market after large airlines like Singapore Airlines and Etihad Airways retired scores of the type, it is perhaps not surprising that the -300s were the first to be shifted, with all of them being sold with the purpose of dismantling for parts and scrapping. 4 have already been fully scrapped. VAS Aero Services acquired 4 airframes in 2022 along with 11 Pratt & Whitney PW40-168 engines and allocated teardown for aftermarket parts. And 1 was acquired by Florida-based AirSail, but this was also to be broken down for parts. The 15 A330-200s have all been stored in Roswell, New Mexico. Unlike the -300s, they are much younger, aged 6 to 8 years when retired. As a result, it was initially expected that they would be snapped up by other global airlines operating the type and looking to add capacity. As it turns out, American did receive interest from a few different airlines for these -200s. Delta was initially the front-runner with its large fleet of A330s and openness to acquiring well-maintained second-hand aircraft. However, American's A330s have Rolls-Royce Trent 700 engines, while Delta's ex-Northwest Airlines A330s are powered by Pratt & Whitney's PW4000 series. This would have meant that the ex-American aircraft would increase maintenance costs and operational complexity. Delta ultimately took a pass and stuck with its incoming A330-900s. Another airline that has been thirsty for wide-body capacity is Qatar Airways. It has also been active in the second-hand market, recently acquiring at least 9 777-300ERs from Cathay Pacific and Virgin Australia. With a small fleet of 10 A330s, 3 of which are the smaller -200, it was speculated that the Middle Eastern carrier was eyeing American's A330-200s. However, it had a similar issue to Delta in that its A330s are powered by a different engine type, General Electric CF6 engines, and so it also reportedly took a pass. In the past month, several media sources have reported that Thai Airways has purchased the ex-American A330-200s. Thai Airways already has 5 A330-300s with Trent 700 engines, which makes American's A330-200s and their Trent 700 engines a perfect fit. FAA aircraft lookups indicate that a number of the A330-200s have now been re-registered with Jetran, an agent that specializes in aircraft transfers. Jetran has ferried at least 3 of them to Pinal County Air Park. Given that the aircraft have been sitting in the desert for nearly 5 years, there is no doubt a considerable amount of work required to return them to operational status. American would not disclose the destination of the sold aircraft, and it remains unclear exactly how many of the A330-200s Thai Airways has acquired. Various reports have stated between 7 and 10. What do you think of American Airlines retiring its A330 fleet? Was it a short-sighted mistake? Let us know what you think by leaving a comment. Simple Flying publishes over 150 articles every week. If you're looking for the latest aviation news and insights, visit simpleflying.com.